Welcome to Let's Write, the podcast where we take a dream movie from an idea to a script, or at least somewhere in between. I'm Ryan Matsunaga, and I'm joined, as always, by Julian.
What's up, guys?
We are finally... were you about to smooth jazz us?
I was. I forgot.
Did I get in there quick enough?
2019 smooth jazz.
Gee, all right, well. The year's off to a fantastic start with a late smooth jazz. We're back from our winter break. We've been gone, if you haven't noticed, for a couple of weeks now, but not forgotten. We did have some fun projects in the meantime, namely our Firefly Season 2 project, which you can find plastered all over our Twitter feed right now. Julian did a really great job illustrating out those episode synopses that we talked about on our last episode, and I think it turned out pretty great.
Yeah, those were a lot of fun. That was a really fun. We're hoping to, I think, do more of that in the new year. Is try and find ways to, like, outside the podcast, create content around what we talk about on the actual podcast itself. So doing like illustration stuff, or what I really want to do is animation. We've talked about that, and like video elements and things like that. So
yeah, I don't know about you, but personally, I think that's my favorite project that we worked on so far on this show was that the entire stretch of the Firefly Season 2.
Yeah, that was for sure the most. I think it was the most fulfilling. I think I liked too that, like, the treatment's really fun to write, but I love that we fully fleshed out like a actual script, like a pilot script. I think that was such a cool moment to be like, we did that. Like, that lives in the world, and we created it.
Yeah, and along those same lines, you and I have been talking over the break, and we're thinking going into starting in February that we really liked the way when we tackled Firefly that we kind of had a few weeks to sort of get it right? We didn't just wasn't just one episode, one treatment. We had a couple episodes to kind of mull it over, refine the idea, and revise it, and then of course build out some of the follow-up content subsequently. So I think going into February, what we decided is that we're actually be dedicating 2 episodes to each dream movie idea going forward. So we'll kind of move from a 2-week schedule per project to a 3-week one. We'll do an episode, and then the next week another episode, and then finally release the treatment on the 3rd week. And hopefully that works out. But we're feeling like it'll give us a little bit more time with each idea, a little bit more time to get it right, and hopefully a little bit more time to take some input from the listeners and see what they're liking and disliking about the idea.
And I think to shed some light a little bit too on like our thinking behind doing that, because we talked about that we seemed to feel like we were always finding the treatment, or like I want to say finding the script, even though we're not writing a script, but like finding the key elements of the story in conversations that we were having offline after we had recorded the podcast, and we kind of realized at a point where we're like, what that should be the podcast.
Right.
You guys should be listening to the parts where we're breaking the story and finding it out. So we're hoping this new format lets us do kind of what we did before, which was like the first podcast, which was just like talking through all the ideas and getting all the pieces and the beats out there, taking a break, coming back to it with a fresh kind of perspective, and then cracking the story, hopefully in the second episode, I guess, of that topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And not toot our own horns or anything, or maybe the opposite of that. But I think you're right. We found that we're finding our best ideas off the mic, right? We'd have an initial episode, we'd brainstorm a little, have some cool ideas, but then when we really got to writing the actual treatment, that's when the real story started to emerge. That's when we started to figure out the parts that we really liked, the parts that were really working, and maybe the stuff that on the podcast we thought were really cool, but once you have to put a pen to paper, don't exactly work for a legible story, right? So that's February. For January, and I guess you're listening to it right now, but we're going to do a little bit of a smaller episode to kind of just kick the year off, get our brains working again. I don't know about you, I'm already starting to feel a little rusty. So it feels a little weird to be back on the mics, but I think this will be good to kind of get the gears turning again. And this is an idea that I feel like you've been wanting to take a stab at for a long time now, ever since we even before we started talking about the idea for this show. And that's I guess for some context, you're a huge James Bond fan.
Yeah, I'd say probably next to Star Wars, that's probably my biggest fandom.
That's yeah. Given the amount that you talk about it, I think that sounds fair. And I think a lot of people, both James Bond fans and not, had a few issues with the most recent one. I think just in terms of the way it was structured and the ideas that it played with, and I think especially for a James Bond fan, there's some things in there that maybe if someone took another stab at it, they might change it up a bit.
Yeah.
So you've been pitching the concept of this to me for maybe years now, I think. So I'm really looking forward to hearing this. But so today we're actually going to take a stab at kind of not re-editing, but maybe polishing up what we feel like Spectre, the most recent James Bond film, could have been or should have been or whatnot.
And I think it's a good. This is kind of a prototype or a pilot, if you will, of expanding the Let's Write format a little bit. I think we realized that a lot of the episodes that we did previously were pretty much fell into the category of sequel that never got made. That was a pretty frequent, or like spinoff that wasn't going to get made or probably wasn't going to be made. And so I think this is we have a couple, not to spoil anything, but we have some fun formats outside of that I think we're going to explore. And one of them is, I think there's something to be said about taking something that was almost there and where there were. I think what's almost more frustrating than an outright bad movie is a movie where there was the bones of something good and that never quite congealed into what it was supposed to be. So this will hopefully be us finding a better movie out of Spectre. So I guess that's a good segue in terms of establishing parameters for this discussion. I think, we could sit here and just reinvent a new Bond movie from scratch. I think that's less of an interesting exercise than trying to keep the same elements and the same pieces that were in the current Spectre movie and finding a way to make them work in a way that's thematically consistent and resonant. And so there's, and I say that meaning like there's a couple key characters that I feel like I would like to keep and find a way to make them better and fit into the movie a little bit better. And that's characters like Max Denby, or they call him C, who's played by Andrew Scott. I think that was a character that like could have been really great and was kind of wasted in that role. I think Christoph Waltz, as spoiler alert, 5 years later, playing Blofeld, Oberhauser, and then Blofeld.
Great casting.
Amazing. That's what's so frustrating about it is like so many of the elements were like, I remember watching trailers for this movie going like, this is going to be the best Bond movie ever made. And then it just wasn't, because it kind of felt like someone making like a paper mache Bond movie where it was like, it's like, let's just slap all these things together and like that makes a Bond movie. Right. And that's not what it's about. So we can be flexible and we can play with things, but to the best of our ability, if we can kind of maintain the elements of the pieces, the characters and things like that, and just find a way to make them better.
Sure.
I think that'd be a cool way to go.
Yeah, I think I rewatched it just a couple hours ago, just kind of prepare for this episode. And what struck me was I forgot how much I actually liked this movie. That I think there's a lot in it that works really well. Not the casting, the least of it, but I think you're right in that it's not that it doesn't work as a movie. I just think some of the things that it wanted to do for the series or for the characters fell a little bit short, and that's where I can certainly see from a perspective of someone who's very much into the kind of Bond mythos and into that fandom, where that might be really frustrating,
right?
And where there feels like there's some unmined gems to kind of patch that over.
Yeah, I think one of the big. I think you're right. I don't hate the movie by any means. I actually like quite a bit of it, and I like a lot of it aesthetically. Like I like a lot of the visual elements and a lot of I think from a standpoint of like taking Bond to different locations and doing like they did a lot of what I've always wanted to see Craig's Bond do. Which is to say, like he went to it like if you're a longtime Bond fan, I think you have a special place in your heart for like a snow set James Bond set piece. So like they went to a really cool, fancy what do you call it? Play I can't think of it.
Ski resort.
Yeah, like
kind of like that. Sort of locale, yeah.
So you had that kind of in there, and then you had like the really cool Rome setting, and you had a amazing desert base in a volcano or in a meteor crater, and like they had a lot of the elements that I think were. That if there was a better story being told, I think it really would have been like really, really key. But I think
sure, and let's just say one more thing, and then I'll let you kind of get to the laying out the bones of it for us. But I think, at least from my perspective, and again, this is coming from someone who's not as big of a James Bond fan. I think I've seen maybe 10 of them total, like in the entire
series. Sacrilege.
Yeah, I mean, once you've seen Moonraker, it's all downhill. Like, I mean, you can't top that one. So, what's the point?
Jaws falls in love, man.
Yeah, it's true.
What else do you want in the movie?
But from my perspective, at least, like I actually really liked the plot, and I think the just the core mechanics of it, or core conceit of it, I thought it was a really great James Bond plot. You know, this idea of, again, spoiler. No more spoiler warnings. This whole episode is going to be spoilers. We have to break down this movie, but just the idea of like, oh, it's a terrorist organization who's committing terrorism to, you know, influence the governments to build this security apparatus that, oh, they're funding. You know, I think that's a fun idea. It's kind of corny, it's kind of cheesy, but it feels like a fun James Bond spy espionage plot. So I think the bare bones of that for me worked really great, and I think as that part of the movie, I enjoyed it a lot. I enjoyed the reveals, but I think where they had to layer on the James Bond kind of mythos to it and put in those characters and put on those ideas and try to tie together 3 previous films. That's where I felt like it really started to feel a little bit short for me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I actually don't mind the idea of trying to tie together the previous films. I kind of actually liked that it was trying to unify them into a cohesive whole, because they flirted with it in Quantum of Solace was kind of, because it was a direct sequel to Casino Royale, which is the first time that there's ever been a Bond film that was a direct sequel to a previous Bond film. They were playing at this idea that Quantum, the organization, I think they were setting that up to be the next Spectre, because at the time they didn't own the rights to the Spectre kind of mythos. I think that was part of the rights issues. So I think they were building that up, and then they kind of ditched it in Skyfall to kind of soft reboot the whole thing. But they were always playing at some greater continuity and greater connective tissue in the Craig Bonds than they had ever done in the past. So I actually don't inherently have an issue with the idea of unifying them. I just don't think it was executed. It was kind of very contrived, you know? And so that's primarily, so the outline that I've kind of written of the bones of how I would change the story keeps most of that intact. It doesn't mess with any of the, I agree. I like the plot of, government or oversight and that whole, I think that was a pretty relevant and modern sort of plan. Keeps that intact. It keeps most of the, if anything, it's trying to earn the one line I love in the film that is completely unearned, but could have been so emotionally powerful, is when Blofeld says, "It was me, James. It was always me. I'm the author of all your pain." Like, that is such a good line that a lot of in me trying to rewrite this film, a lot of it is just trying to earn that line. Because if you build the pieces up to that right, that is such a kick in the crotch line. And so a lot of it is just trying to find a way where the reveals and the twists and turns actually make sense within the context. That's
interesting. So in your mind, kind of, it's my first instinct when I saw this movie is like, oh, I think the easiest fix to make is just don't make Blofeld Bond's brother. Okay, and he's just Blofeld, and he's evil and he's maniacal, and it works. But your instinct is actually to lean the other way and make that connection stronger, so it makes a little more sense and it feels like a little more earned.
I think so, yeah. And I'll run you through my outline, and we don't have to stick to it. It's what I wrote like a couple years ago when I was really bothered by this movie.
You've been talking about it for so long. Yeah. I feel like it is the real movie in my head at this point.
It's really this is just how it came out, but I'm open to the other angle as well. I just think that's a cool angle. I just think they needed to. I think the critical error is, and we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, but they made the same error that the Star Trek Into Darkness made with Khan, where it was like the reveal of that character being who they are is a reveal made to the audience and not to the characters, and therefore has no weight because it's just a fan service moment, right? Sure. Like he says, "I'm actually not Franz Oberhauser. I went by my mother's name, Ernst Stavro Blofeld," and the music swells, and it's like there's no reaction on Bond's face because that he could have just said like, "I'm John David Washington," and it is the same result. It's the same reaction from Bond. So within the context of the narrative, it doesn't work. So kind of my thing was, from the start, trying to find a way that the Denby character and the Blofeld character we could kind of play with that in the beginning when you don't quite know. And because they cast Andrew Scott, who's known for playing Moriarty, everyone was already like, this guy's a villain. So my thought was like, we lean heavy into that. So you kind of have the same general trappings of the beginning part of the plot. I like the idea that Bond would find the ring early on, and he would take that straight to Q, and they would analyze it, run they identify this stuff right away, as opposed to halfway through the movie, and then go ahead.
I think that's an interesting fix right there, because just to kind of refresh myself on what the reaction to that movie was, I did go back and read some reviews and kind of like just reoriented myself with what other people had problems with. Because this is my second time watching it, and I think I liked it a lot more than the first time through. But something that a lot of people pointed to that I'm inclined to agree is that from a structural standpoint, a lot of the things in this movie don't really make sense. They just are necessary to have the next piece of the movie followed, right? I think that's one of them is the discovery of the ring at the beginning.
Right.
From when you kind of zoom out from that, it doesn't really make any sense why Q would send Bond to kill that specific person and then go to that specific person's funeral, right? Because he didn't learn anything extra from traveling to Rome. He had the ring already, right? And he could have gone to that meeting or whatever it might be. So I think there's a lot of steps that it kind of had to take in terms of like, oh, Q has this post-mortem message, oh, there's this widow that he meets, and then he finds. Actually, I just watched the movie. I don't remember how he gets to the Blofeld's meeting, like with the ring. So I think that makes sense in my head, just kind of condensing that in, and the ring is the important part. Bringing the ring to
that should be the catalyst.
That seems pretty straightforward.
It's the first thing they should like. That doesn't make sense why it takes him to the halfway through the movie for him to be like, Q, can you like run a fingerprint scanner on this thing, or a DNA, whatever. I'll run you through the bullet points real quick. Feel free to stop me whenever. This is just my thought on it, and then we can iterate from there. So, analyze the ring. In the meantime, we're introduced to Max Denby, the new head of whatever Nine Eyes or whatever the program was that he was supposed to be running, and he's also trying to shut down MI6. Come back to Q. His analysis yields the same. Like this is all your past enemies have been part of this thing, but here's the difference. At this point, I would want him to say, and it's led by a figure named Blofeld. We have it's just a alias. It's in the same way that in Mission Impossible Fallout, it was what was his name? John. It was just like an alias name, right?
Right.
I can't. I'm losing it. I can't think of it off the top of my head. But same thing. It's just like all these people worked for an organization called Spectre, and it was led by a guy named Blofeld. We have no picture of him. Nobody knows. He's a ghost. Like we don't know anything about him. And so they gives them a lead. They send them off to Rome to go. They're gonna have a meeting. Like that was where this guy was supposed to be next, and they're gonna have this meeting in Rome. So he heads to Rome, infiltrates the meeting, and he discovers that his foster brother, who he thought was dead, obviously this whole time, he's alive and he's working for Blofeld, and Blofeld turns out to be Max Denby.
Oh, okay.
And so he's in charge of the whole meeting, and he's running it ruthlessly. And you're like, oh, I got it. This guy's infiltrated the highest level of the British government, is trying to shut down the agency that would stop him, and is proposing a program that would allow him access to all information in the world.
Right.
And we present Oberhauser in this case as a really meek, sort of like almost like an accountant or an assistant. Like he's just kind of there. You almost get the feeling he doesn't want to be there, but he's like somehow got. And so Bond is like, holy shit, that's my. I haven't seen you. I thought you were dead.
Right. Did they meet at this point?
So they would have I was imagining like something happens. They have some sort of set piece occurs where people realize Bond is there, and it's a kind of a mad dash to kill him or whatever. And Bond is trying to escape, and Oberhauser is injured, and Bond kind of has this moment where they see each other again, and then he's like, "What are you doing here?" And you kind of, that's when he maybe would suggest that he didn't want to be there, and he's like, "Come with, like, help me stop this. Like, we can, I can protect you." And he's like, I can't, and he bounces, and so then you're like, so now I think hopefully we have a little bit of a connection. Like then I feel like now we've established kind of like an emotional through line with the two of them. And so then he would basically pursue Oberhauser and try and take down Blofeld, Max Denby. And he would meet Madeline Swan, and you can do all the same pieces. Like you can have him meet her, you can have him meet Mr. White, who we could learn had like a crisis of conscience late in life, was trying to actually take down Spectre once he realized he kind of gotten, and then that would I think hopefully further the idea that make it a little bit more realistic, the idea that the Oberhauser would also be potentially trying to do the same thing. Like maybe I think as long as you have an open thread of there's a chance that he could be redeemed, it makes the ending even more powerful.
He just has like one subtle line, like no one ever leaves Spectre or something like that. Like if the door was there, maybe he would walk through it, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think just teasing that, like just getting the audience on the hook of like, you could, and Christoph Waltz is he can play such a good villain, but he's also so good at playing, like in Inglourious Bastards, he plays such a good, warm-hearted caretaker, right? So like we're playing that up, right? And so then they eventually get to the Spectre base in Morocco, and Bond would encounter Denby and Oberhauser, and he, Oberhauser would have his face scarred from the injury that he had previously, and then at this point, Bond is, I guess, trying to like to take down Denby or whatever, and here's where I'm stealing a trick out of a play out of Batman Begins playbook, where at this point Oberhauser would step forward and reveal himself to actually be Blofeld, and Denby is just his fake Ra's al Ghul to ward off potential assailants and stuff like that, and he murders Denby right there. And you see the immediate shift in his demeanor from like kind of like Christopher Reeve Clark Kent to Superman status, where his whole demeanor shifts immediately to like ruthless cold blood, and then you're like, oh god damn, like that. And then you can hopefully feel it with Bond when he's like, this guy that he's been trying to redeem hopefully throughout the film is actually the guy, like he is actually the one trying to do all this. And then he could basically like reveal something along the lines of that. It's like the reason he's hated Bond so much is because he tried to kill him in his youth. Because you could play that same thing where he was jealous of how much attention he was getting from his father, and he tried to kill Bond, but accidentally killed his father instead.
I like that a lot better,
right?
That's I couldn't get over that in the version, the real version of the movie, like that as the motivation. Where he's
it's
just
absurd.
Like my dad loves this kid more than me, so I'm gonna kill my dad and then pretend I'm dead too.
Like
30 years.
It makes no sense. But I think it'd be real to have like a sociopathic kid be like, I'm gonna kill you, and then he fucks it up and kills his dad on accident.
And he blames it on Bond.
He blames it on. So the whole time, and then you have him deliver the line, "I am the author of all." Then it's like I think you earn that so much more if it's like that's why, like he's had this lifelong dedication to fucking you to the point where he's become the head of this organization and actually installed a fake person in charge, who just murdered in cold blood, is just lying on the floor. And then from there, one of the biggest things that bothers me about the ending of the movie is that it has like, for no reason, a second climax. Like by all accounts, if it was a Bond movie as it was traditionally, the base escape is the climax. Okay. Like the base assault and escape it's like most Bond movies end that way.
Sure.
Dr. No, Spy Who Loved Me. That's the big thing. You extend that out for 35, 40 minutes. It never made sense to me why the base escape is one of the weirdest scenes in a Bond movie, or maybe in any like action movie in recent memory, where he just kind of like walks out.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
He actually just walks in too. Like, I was waiting for the moment, like in that sequence where he'd reveal he had a plan. You know, like, okay, like, oh, but I did this thing and now I'm escaping. He literally just walks, like they get off like a bus or something, and then his chauffeur picks him up, and brings him to the place, and he has absolutely zero plan there. Like he's just they could have just shot him right there.
Yeah,
like, wouldn't have been able to stop him.
Well, what's even weirder about that is that but at the end of the movie, you're meant to believe that like Blofeld did all these things to get him to this point so that he could like rub it in his face. But everyone throughout the movie is trying to kill Bond. So like, even though he's supposed to make it to be alive, he's definitely trying to be murdered by every other so like there's so many pieces that don't make sense. He just kind of he just shoots like 3 people who can't seem to hit him from like 10 yards away, and then walks into a helicopter. And it's just such a bizarre scene. And then like the real climax of the movie is this weird like nighttime London, like Blofeld, spent all this time printing targets of all his
just at Kinko's,
like
just photocopy.
Dude, it's so weird and contrived. So I would kill all that, and you just make a really great base climax escape scene, and that's the movie. And then the ending can be the same, where he leaves Blofeld alive, and you leave it open to sequels and blah blah blah. Like that's I think that's the general structure.
I mean, one thing that I did like about the ending, and I didn't love it, but I liked, I think, what they were shooting for, is that at least in my mind, like the way they set up Blofeld and the way in like my imagination he is, just based on like the pop culture kind of status of him. Is he's sort of like a mastermind. He's like sort of bringing all these puzzle pieces together and manipulating things. And so didn't really feel like he ever did that, because again, like the full movie, it's like his one assassin is just chasing Bond, and not in very clever ways. It's just like it's it's Batista. He's like throwing stuff and hitting him and stuff. And so when he finally gets to the end where he sets up this elaborate like, oh, you have to make the ultimate choice sort of thing, that's when I sort of started to feel like, oh, okay, it's a Bond villain. It's like it's the classic Dr. Evil sort of lowering you slowly into a pit of sharks or something sort of thing.
Right.
Just what didn't work for me is that way that was structured did not make a ton of sense. Right. And honestly, like the resolution of it was a little bit frustrating because right, if I remember correctly, it was captured the Swan, the woman that Bond's been working up to this point, and he says basically like you can either save her or you can escape, but if you go to save her, you won't be able to escape in time, which doesn't really seem like a choice because either way she's gonna die, right? So not much of a choice he has to make, and then he resolves that by just escaping.
Yeah.
like there's nothing. He's like, oh, he didn't figure something out. He's just like, I'm just gonna leave. Like there was enough time. you know? And then after they escape, right, he's chasing down Blofeld, and Blofeld's escaping, and then he's in a helicopter, and like Bond's shooting at him, and Blofeld doesn't seem very worried because again, like it's shooting a handgun like a mile away at a helicopter, and then again, like Bond takes him down, but his solution isn't like he figured something out. He almost like he shoots harder, like he just like takes an extra second to aim and shoots down the helicopter. So I think that if we can kind of figure out how to reformat that climax so we can kind of get those two elements, I feel like I'm getting stuck on one, like Blofeld actually manipulating something so it feels like, oh wow, he is really brilliant and evil, and two, like Bond actually escaping in a way that doesn't seem convenient almost, like actually having to get through a predicament with his brains or wits or brawn or whatever it might be. I think would make that entire kind of final sequence a little bit more interesting for me.
I think that's you brought up a good point. That's a big problem with almost every part of the movie is like at no point is Bond is not a spy in this movie. He's just like a guy who goes places. Like he just walks into everything, which like that's always been like that's the swagger of 007. He'll just saunter into the room, but not to this like this is ridiculous, like silly when you actually bring up all these points where it's like he just walked into the funeral of that woman, he just walked into her house, he just walks into the Spectre meeting. He just walks up to the base. Like it's all, and there's no plan. There's zero attempt at coming up with like a creative strategy. Like Skyfall did that so well, where once they realized what was happening, he was like, I have a strategy. Let's lure him to a place that we know,
right,
and set up a trap.
Right.
And this is where we make our stand. Like such a good, that's a good plan, Casino Royale. It's like, it's all based on the poker game. And he loses because of his hubris. And then he says, but I know, I can do this. Just help me. Like everything, there's elements of like espionage there. And this film doesn't have that. So I think that's something to be conscious of too, as we go, is like, how can we inject more espionage back into the film? And also I do want to mention, I would love to talk about Madeline Swan's character. Because I think what they were trying to do, the seeds of like the whole movie, the seeds of what they were trying to do were there and were interesting. It just never kind of came together in a way. But I would love to explore an arc for her where, because Vesper has very much been like the one he couldn't get over, right? Like the thing. And I think Vesper is interesting from a standpoint of like someone who shouldn't have been in the life that was sucked into it, that was seduced into it by her boyfriend, who turned out to be like a dude who does that, to many women, right? To get secrets. Swan was presented in a way, or at least where it felt like they were hinting at or trying to get at, was that she was born into the life. Her father was the guy,
right?
And she's tried to keep it away from her as much as possible her whole life. But there's kind of that inevitability of like, you give into your nature, or you give into your lineage, or you can't escape your lineage or your parents' legacy or whatever. And so she kind of like falls in. And so a lot of people didn't really like that pairing, or that they seemed to set her up as like a long-term girlfriend for Bond and like the I love you. And a lot of that wasn't really earned, but I think it was there. It could have been there. You know what I mean? Like where she could have been this great foil to Vesper and counterpart to Bond, where it's like she's probably like the only person who would really understand him. Like fundamentally, Vesper would have never understood Bond because they don't come from the same world. Like they had their little honeymoon thing in Venice,
Right.
but I don't know how well that actually, when you actually think about it, versus Madeline Swan has known this life since she was born. Like she knows what this is. She's probably the only person who could understand the life of a hitman or an assassin or a spy. I think there's something really interesting there. I think she's a really compelling character to pair with Bond. There's like probably a couple scenes that you could put in or rework a couple existing scenes to give her that arc. You know what I mean?
That's interesting. Yeah, I think for how integral she was supposed to be to the plot, she felt very tertiary to it, right? The entire kind of role that I guess Mr. White, and then is that his name, right? The quantum character, and then his daughter Madeline Swan had in the movie was really to just get Bond to that crater base, and the only thing that got him there was that Mr. White had literally like written down the coordinates somewhere, right? Like there wasn't any really beyond that, like any relationship with Quantum or any relationship with her father that really mattered beyond Mr. White had written down the coordinates at a place that he probably could have Googled, right? Because he knew the name. He just he didn't know where it was. So okay, let's kind of bringing it back to the top. I think the bones there are really interesting, and they feel a lot more concise. I'd love to kind of figure out how we can kind of construct or layer on top of that to get it to the point where we really feel like that relationship is earned, the kind of status of Blofeld as this villainous mastermind is earned, and then whatever kind of Bond's sort of drive into the sunset or whatever feels earned as well. Because I think that's an important piece. In at least in my mind, then, in the way it was marketed and in the way it was kind of structured, it did feel like as a possible exit for Daniel Craig's Bond. To be like, this is the end of this 4-film arc, and now either he's off to a new adventure or he's retired as a character, or either way, it's the end of this piece of it, right? And I'd love to find a way to make that feel a little bit more earned.
Sure. I think there's something I think there is something interesting about the idea of legacy or consequence of action, or like I think that's what the movie wanted to have as its central theme, and it just kind of got lost in a bunch of set pieces that had to string together. And I think it even extends into the title, right? Like Spectre, like is like a shadow, like it's something that follows you. And I think if we just like hone in on the anchor in that I think that gives every character the necessary arc. If you just anchor in that theme of consequence or past or history or legacy, right? Like each character can grapple with that in a different way. Like we just kind of talked about it with how that could affect Madeline. We're talking about M's legacy because she's passed on at this point. We're revisiting Bond's history, both like past, and the events of the movies that we've seen. And I think even Blofeld, to an extent, if we're structuring him in this way, is got a history with, and maybe there's something with what his father did for work that could help tie him into why this would be his pursuit. Like maybe his father worked in some sort of capacity related to, like somehow that relates to his interest in government oversight.
Okay.
There could be something there. I think rooting everything in that idea, in that theme,
like choices in the first 3 films, and then the 4th film is about consequences.
Right? Yeah, I like that a lot, and I think it just ties in thematically with the title in a nice way.
So I think one thing that the film plays with and never really commits to is this idea of the 00 program kind of being outdated or a relic of the time. And I think that there's a little bit of meta commentary on what role does the James Bond franchise have in the world with Mission Impossibles and Bournes and all of these kind of spy franchises that where it's not kind of the only one out there. And I think it didn't really ever kind of fully commit to the premise that the audience is supposed to believe to some extent that maybe the 00 program is kind of outdated, and maybe it is time for a more modern security system, and having a guy running around the world in a tuxedo and a pistol is probably not the best way to protect the country, right? I think there could be something interesting to play with in terms of a meta stance of carrying that through a little bit stronger in the movie, and then being able to end at a point where the kind of Bond himself has sort of reclaimed that legacy and has figured out like what it means to him to be a double O. And then in kind of a larger sense, like sort of reinvigorating the franchise is like, this is why we need 007 movies, going forward. And I think maybe rooting the beginning of that in a little bit of a, and I hate to go, dark with anything, right? But maybe in a little bit of a darker place in the sense that he's coming off the death of M, right? In the previous film Skyfall, and they play with it, but it's very kind of coy. And he's like, oh, like I don't mind that I blew up half a city block, like, oh, I was on vacation, or he's like, I think he says like you're suspended without pay or something like that. And he's like, oh, very good, sir. But I think if we leaned even harder into that, where maybe he is kind of on a bit of a vendetta, he's just like, he's kind of lost his compass a little bit, where he's just going around the world. He's just gonna figure out, M left me this last message, or however else we want to set that up, and that I'm just gonna go and kill these people that are on the list. Like I don't care if it's for the good of the country. I don't care if there's people that's gonna get in the way. Like I've tried to do it the quote unquote right way for 3 movies now, and everyone around me just gets killed. Like I'm just gonna use my abilities the way I can, and then eventually I'm gonna get killed, and that's where my life's gonna go.
Would it be too much to even say that, like, as of the start of the movie, like MI6 has been shut down? Like, could
so
we
not even on the verge of it, just completely shut down?
Could we just go there and say like this Denby character is he's shut down like not indefinitely, like it's not like a permanent. They're just trying to figure out what to do with it, like because Skyfall deals with those themes a lot, and I think by the end of it, you're like, by the end of Skyfall wants to earn its ending of we do need double O's, and like this is like there's a place for this. And so like using that pre-credit scene where he kind of blows up half the city, like you could come back from the theme song and have the consequence of that action be like 3-4 months later, like MI6 has been shut down pending investigations, and this like they're just trying to figure out as a government, is this even a viable thing? And maybe that's gives a little more like impetus to him, just because I love the idea of him just kind of going outside the system and being a little bit of vigilante in his approach. Is that too far to just go right there and just shut it down?
Yeah, I think that's worth playing with, and just having like MI6 being shut down as kind of or at least suspended in some way, like as a direct result of his actions. That could be interesting. Maybe taking kind of all of them off the grid, because there's a fun bit at the end where I think Moneypenny and Q and New M, what was his code name?
Yeah, it's just M.
It's M.
Just
M again.
M,
yeah. Are all kind of they're working together with Bond to to stop that C character, and they're kind of all off the grid at that point, and just kind of working on their own, and that was kind of fun, and that was kind of interesting.
Yeah,
maybe like framing a little bit more of the movie around that could kind of make it a little bit easier to have the excuse of having Q go off with James Bond and go on a mission or something, or help him kind of liberate that car from, without it being a little bit of a stretch to figure out like how they didn't know Bond was missing for like a week, right? Yeah, I think that's interesting. Let's play with that. So we're starting the film in the same place, Mexico City, right? The same kind of action beats. He's there to assassinate this target that it's, I guess, do we want to leave in the angle that it's kind of a post-mortem message from M to Bond?
I think so. I don't see why, like, I don't see any reason that's a problem. It just kind of sets the plot in motion.
Sure.
I wonder if there's a better way to, like, kind of begs the question why she wouldn't have told him about that while she was alive, or like why they had to wait until she was. But I don't even know. I don't know if that's a problem we need to solve. I think I think it's probably enough to be like, this is how the plot starts.
Sure. Yeah, I guess in some sense, maybe you could say like she was trying to protect him from that kind of legacy of how intertwined, right? The British government, or I guess whatever it might be, is with this Spectre organization, right? Because we had in Skyfall, right? The what's forgetting his name, but the bad guy in Silva, right? Silva in Skyfall was a former agent of the British government, right? So I think, and he turns out to be an agent of Quantum, and I guess an agent of, or I guess not necessarily Quantum, but at least Spectre, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's something interesting there in terms of like maybe she was on to something that she just didn't have time to unravel, and she kind of sends Bond as like, you're the last person I can trust, right? If anyone gets this disc, it's you. And maybe it's less of like, I thought the whole angle of like kill this person and go to his funeral was a little bit contrived. Maybe just this is my only lead. Track it down, and then Bond kills that guy, right? So like he's a little bit off the rails, a little bit unhinged, and maybe he gets a little bit lucky to retrieve that ring, and that they still have a lead, even though he blew up half of the city block trying to hunt this guy down. So I think like that all still works. We start in Mexico City, he finds the ring, but you're saying when he gets back to London, he kind of hands that over to Q at this point.
I think so. I think that makes sense. Like that's the first thing you would do,
Right.
as a logical human being. Just like analyze this, see what you get, because he makes that decision in the movie. He just makes it like way too late,
Right.
you know. So I think it makes sense for him to just be like, what can you pull off this?
Right. And just to remind myself, I just watched this movie, so I feel like I should know this. But how did the ring link it link him to his brother? Was the ring worn by his brother at some point, or I remember DNA had something to do with it, but
I don't think the ring linked him to his brother. The ring had traces of DNA from all of his previous villains.
Oh, so they all had touched the ring at some point or some effect. Okay.
And then he doesn't know anything about his brother. That leads him to the meeting where he sees his brother.
And he recognizes him.
That's why he tells Q later, like, I saw. He's like, he's dead. He's like, no, I saw him. You know. So that I think that's what it was. So the ring I don't think necessarily had, which is why I think it makes sense for the ring to present the same information, but also include with it like, you know, we've been tracking this character named Blofeld the same way that, why can't I remember this Fallout character? The John, not John Apostle. I was gonna say it's the apostles that are trying to.
John Lark.
John Lark.
Yeah.
You know, it's like they know it stands to reason that the intelligence agency would know the alias. They just wouldn't. They just can't find out any information. You know. So I think it'd be good to just get the blow. The problem that we're trying to solve here is that if this was constructed in the right way from the start, Casino Royale would have ended with a scene with Mr. White visiting a character in a shadowy study,
right?
And he would have turned around,
right?
And he would have had a cat in his lap, and you never would have seen his face, and he would have given some sinister instruction to Mr. White in Casino Royale,
right?
And then everything in this movie would be a lot easier to earn. So the problem is I think you have to get the Blofeld of it out of the way as soon, like into the consciousness of the audience as soon as possible.
Sure.
In order to earn the reaction at the end, you know, because if Bond spends the whole movie knowing the name Blofeld, and then at the end you connect the piece of who that is, I think that makes you go, oh shoot, because then you're kind of rocked with Bond, and then that means something to him because he's been tracking Blofeld the whole movie. It just turns out to be not the person he thought.
Right.
So I think it makes sense to reveal that right then.
Okay. So let's try this. Maybe so they at Mexico City, recovers the ring, comes back, finds out as a direct result of his actions, like 00 program is being hindered in some way, and that the C character, what's his C? Is his name just C? Did he have a?
That's what he is in the movie.
Right.
I'm pretty sure that's like them joking and calling him C.
That's not his actual code name.
I don't think it is. No, I think his name is Max Denby. His name is Max Denby.
I don't remember that name being used too much in the movie.
Yeah, I always thought maybe they were like, because they say it like, because everyone else is like MQ, you know, whatever, and I always got the feeling that they were calling him C, like cock, or you know, because they say it in the movie like that, like when they assign him, because they give him that name. That's never a title given to him.
Let me see. Okay.
So we can call it.
Yeah. Or Denby.
Denby.
So we find out that kind of whole thing is being spearheaded by this Denby character, who's the same way, you know, as it is right now. He's suggesting this kind of new surveillance program that's they're going to join up with all these other countries and create this, you know, new dynamic modern surveillance program that's going to replace the 00 thing. And so kind of like maybe on his way out, sort of James is a kind of a cajoling, you know, a Q to run an analysis on this thing. So same kind of concept as he did here. Is like, instead of stealing the car, which unnecessary if you're trying to, you know, stay under the radar, maybe more just you know, you got to do this one last thing, help me out, you know, run the analysis on this, or maybe even bring you know, Moneypenny in a little bit earlier, in terms of like being Q and Moneypenny kind of helping him under the radar to you know, carry out once I mean, because once they see M's last message, you know, I feel like they would, yeah, all right, this is worth going to prison for the rest of my life for, this is a worthy cause. So they run the analysis on the ring, and I think that would be interesting if that would be the moment where he discovers that his brother's still alive. Like maybe they run the analysis, they like, okay, this is this guy that you were tracking down. This is who he actually is in the database, and like we got a bunch of like surveillance pictures of him that before she died, she had commissioned, and like in one of those photos, like he sees his brother or something. It's like, oh, that I know that face, like that's my brother. He's been dead for 40 years or whatever. And then that's, I think we can introduce a little bit earlier that, he had a stepbrother-ish that had died in a tragic accident along with his father. And that kind of sent him on that course of life that he was on, right? To set up, his brother's still alive and he's working for the bad guys. And I think that could be the interesting link that gets us to the Rome location, right? So like in the surveillance photos, they're like, they were both spotted in this area, and then Bond travels to Rome and then uses the ring to figure out where that meeting is and infiltrates it. And then that, I think, plays out just the way you were describing it. We see the I can't remember his guy, Wenby?
Denby. We call him Wendy.
So it's not a great name.
Wendigo.
Wendigo, yeah. So we see Denby is like, oh, he's the head of Spectre. Oh, that makes sense. Or he's actually Blofeld. And then I think at that point, Bond still gets caught, and maybe even the Oberhauser character helps him to escape.
Oh, I love that.
Gets him out of there. And that's where he delivers the line, like, no one ever leaves Spectre, like.
Ooh, I love that.
You're still alive, and we don't have time to get the full story while he's still alive. But it's maybe he has the scar already. Would that be too soon, or do we want to give him the scar later?
My thought was he gets the scar in whatever scuffle is happening when Bond escapes.
Okay.
But I don't think it changes anything to just have him already have the scar. Although
that reveal would not work as well if we associate the scar with Blofeld.
Actually, yeah, we can't give him the scar because then
he's just a guy. He's just a guy at this point.
Because I like the idea of the Denby guy is such an obvious like villain.
Yeah, right.
So then I like messing with the audience in the sense that like so I'm thinking from the perspective of a casual viewer, right? Like if you're a diehard Bond fan, you're probably gonna not be surprised by the fact that Oberhauser turns out to be Blofeld in the end. It might still kind of catch you off guard, but I think for the average viewer, I think it's so cool, it's so fun to swerve into to lull them into a sense of security by saying like, oh yeah, the guy that seemed kind of villainous, like, oh, he's the villain. Like I'm smarter. I'm smarter than this movie. Yeah. Like I saw that coming.
And we play that as a reveal.
Yeah,
like they're in that big boardroom.
Exactly.
And they still have that same entrance where like they all stand to attention, and he walks in, and it's the fucking Denby guy. Yeah.
And then I love that you just fuck that in the end. In the end, where you just have Christoph Waltz like murder that character and be like, no.
I think the scene plays out the same way almost it does in the movie right now.
Yeah.
Where like he's just aware that James is there and kind of addresses him.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we have the last 00 agent, like, and kind of almost taunting him, like, I shut down your program. Like,
it's so good.
I guess you're here kind of off the books sort of thing, like it's today your day off sort of. He gets chased, and maybe, in some small way, the Oberhauser character helps him escape. And he's like,
I love
come
that.
with me. And he's like, no, you don't leave Spectre.
I love that.
And then we still have a chase sequence. Like this is such a minor thing to change, but one thing that did bother me was the introduction of what's his name, Jinx or something to
Hinks.
Hinks. Was it really?
It's Hinks. Yeah.
Okay. The Dave Bautista character, who apparently gets the job by just murdering his counterpart, like at the boardroom table.
Yep.
Which is, I mean, if you're in like the crime business and you have a very talented assassin, like that's probably still a good asset to hold on to.
Yep.
And it's not like he did it in a way that was like, oh yeah, he's clearly the better. He like just surprised him and murdered him. I don't know. That struck me as weird. But whatever introduction that Higgs character actually has, I think we still have him have the chase sequence. I think that's a fun sequence with the the cars and the flamethrower and stuff. I think all good there. And then remind me again when they get from there, is that when he brings in Q to analyze the ring?
He doesn't bring Q in until he's in, I forget where the snow location is, but is it Switzerland or something? Where is that foundation that he visits?
You're right. I can't remember where the foundation is, but
that's where Q visits him and says, you need to come back right now. Like my job is on the line. And he's like, can you just analyze this? And then they meet in his hotel room. And that's where Madeline Swan is like, the organization is called Spectre. Like, I know.
So in the movie as it is right now, after they get out of the Rome sequence, so the information he gleans from that scene is that they're sending the Hinks character after the Pale King, like to kill, and he gathers, oh, that's Mr. White, and then somehow figures out where Mr. White is, and then he goes and tracks him down, which is a sequence I actually really like. I think that can kind of stay as it is, almost to a T.
Yeah. I love that reunion.
And that's where Mr. White explains what Spectre is, and then he has his daughter, and that he'll basically help lead Bond to Spectre if he can protect his daughter. So I think the same sequence plays out that way. Then we go to the mountain sequence. I'm trying to remember what got pushed forward there, other than just picking up Madeline Swan. Was that the only kind of development there?
Yeah.
Okay. And do we want to pad that out a little bit, or how are we feeling about that location?
If I had it my way, I love the location.
Mm-hmm.
I love the kind of psych assessment of Bond, that she does. If I had it my way, I would axe the entire set piece that follows, because I think it's the dumbest Pierce Brosnan set piece of all time.
It is like reminiscent of a Pierce Brosnan
it's
action scene, right? Like I'm trying to remember what movie it was from, but I remember him also having like a sliding down a mountain and a bunch of vehicles.
It's just not a good set piece. I don't think, like, it doesn't really accomplish anything. And it's another example of Bond just being dumb. Like, he's just like, Bond is cocky,
right,
and will push the limit, but Bond's not dumb. So for him to try and fly an airplane into trees is just dumb. So like, if we could just, I don't know if we need to come up with another set piece, but if I had it my way, there'd be a different set piece of like how he gets to Madeline,
Okay. All right. Maybe we come back to that. But I think
could that be an opportunity for, like, if he's trying to rescue her, and then could it end on her actually like killing those dudes? And then like, so that's where we start to get a glimpse of her other nature. And she's like, she's like visibly shaken by it. And like, ugh, like I didn't want to do, this is not the person I am. Like, she's telling herself that this is not who she is, but she's like, been in this enough that when it comes down to it, she'll kill, whoever, like she'll kill henchmen or whatever. That might be a place to start to seed that.
Sure.
If we're meeting her there.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Like maybe like Bond's fighting a henchman or something, and then Bond's about to get killed, and then all of a sudden like a couple shots ring out, and you see, oh, she like reloaded the gun that he was trying to reload.
Yeah,
or
I think that'd be cool.
And, like, just set up. She knows what she's doing.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have the same kind of general direction. He gets Swan finds out that the American is the hotel. I don't remember where it was, but
Morocco.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that's seems like a very classic spy movie location.
It's actually one of my favorite sequences when they're in one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie, which has nothing to do with the plot, but it's when he's drunk and the mouse crawls across the floor and he pulls out his gun. He's like, "Who are you working for?" Like, I don't know why. That's such a Bond thing to do. Anyway, sorry.
And
sidebar.
Yeah, I think to some extent too, like that felt to me like more of what they wanted to go with, just from a larger sense of like a Bond that's kind of a little bit past like what we would consider like a sane and stable individual. Like he's just been pushed a couple steps further, where he's a little bit more of a wild card than even Bond is known to be.
Yeah.
Okay, but so I think they have that scene, then they discover that Mr. White, I guess, was a tracking Spectre, was planning to.
I can't quite remember what his thing is in the film. I like the idea that he did try to take. I think he kind of becomes the you can get out of Spectre. Like we have the line no one ever leaves Spectre.
Right.
It would make sense why Bond would want to track him down, because he was the only one able to do it.
Right.
And he's actually not only that, but he's been actively working to take them down. So it's in the context of the movie that we're making. I think that works a little bit better for his motivation.
Then maybe to some extent, like he had left some information in Morocco, but he had been forced to like flee the country because like the Spectre agents are like one step behind him.
Sure.
And then eventually, they basically catch up with him in Austria, where he shoots himself. So I think like he left that like vital piece of information in Morocco for Bond to find.
Sure.
And then he uses that to track them down to their very ostentatious base in the middle of a meteor crater somewhere. Right. Still a cool location though.
Very cool aesthetically.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the better points in the movie where they lean into, I think, the thematic arc that they wanted, where, like as corny as it was, the sort of speech that Oberhauser gives on like it's a meteor, like this is like an unstoppable object, something like what it can do to the things around it.
You were mentioning you want to find ways to make him more of the mastermind. Mm-hmm. Could we pad out, because we basically want to, I think we want to hang out more at that base and kind of finish the film proper.
Okay.
Minus like a short epilogue or whatever, back in London or whatever. But like, I think by and large, it makes sense that most of the climax takes place. I just don't see why you have to come back to London to do anything that happens there. You could do a lot of those pieces within the base, but to just pad out that whole sequence, could we do something where he makes contact with Oberhauser like secretly, and he helps him get in, like then, because then there's a plan. It's like, we're gonna sneak in here, we're gonna disable the thing that they're like. It's more about like, let's first take care of the thing that he's trying to do with like he's gonna launch the government oversight drone, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like, he's gonna launch the network or whatever. We need to stop that first. Then we'll deal with the Blofeld of it all. And Oberhauser would help him do that, so that then the twist of the knife is even worse at the end, when it's like he just did all this to get, like he was getting you in there the whole time.
I love that idea that like Bond's plan, I guess, actually has a plan.
Yeah,
like that
he's got to have some plan.
That he's somehow made contact with his brother or something to that extent, and that's how he's infiltrating the base. And then he gets in there. He is trying to stop whatever this key turn that's going to happen, that's going to turn the system online. And then maybe he gets caught, and the Blofeld character is like holding a gun to him. It's like, all right, well, no, James Bond's going to get shot. And then Blofeld gets shot, and we see like, oh, Oberhauser did it. And like, oh man, he's helping him. Like, oh, we're
so
on
good.
that. Like he like actually decided to do it, like he's a good guy again, and like he's helping him escape, and like they're getting out of the base, and then they reach like a dead end, and then like a door comes down or something, and like Bond is trapped, and like, oh, he reveals like, I would just wanted to get you into position, like like the kind of like classic, like, oh, like you thought you were escaping, but I was just taking you to your front row seat because I want you to watch this, like that's what you're here for, because this is why I orchestrated all of this, like I knew where Mr. White was, like
so good.
I knew where where the hotel was in Morocco, but I wanted you to be here when I get to do this, because it doesn't mean as much unless my brother is here to witness, what I'm about to do
so good.
to this organization that means so much to him.
Like he could literally like be like escorting them, like, we got, okay, take a left here, I know this base, like I know, and then take a right in here, and then they enter this room, and it's like an auditorium with chairs, and you're like, this doesn't look like the way, and it just gets weird, and he's like, no, just sit here, I promise. And he says, and then the glass comes down between them, and then his demeanor changes, and he walks up to that, and then because I love the scene that they did at the end of the movie with the glass between them, where Bond tries to shoot him, and he can't get, and they just have that conversation, so you could have that same sort of situation happen. And that's when his whole thing shifts.
Yeah. So I think to some extent, like he's almost like a showman, like this means so much to him. He wants to make a theatrical performance out of it. Like they get into this, like they're running down these corridors, like, go this way, take a left, take a right, and they get into this room, and then all of a sudden, like all the lights in the room turn on, and maybe like, oh, it's like an auditorium, and all around them are all the members of Spectre, and he's making a show of it. Like, I wanted the last 00 agent to be here when we turn the system online.
Dude, God, I got chills. Like, that's so good. That's such a good, and you could probably give him the scar in the action sequence before that, like whatever, when he kills and saves Bond from Blofeld, quote unquote. You could probably have that scuffle involve him getting his scar.
Sure.
And then, because I think at that point the audience would be so wrapped up in the just craziness of it all that because like I like the idea of him having the scar when he's just, I know it's aesthetic, but it's a big part of the character. I think that'd be cool for him to have right when he's going to make his reveal, but I just don't see any way for him to get it other than maybe as they're escaping, maybe like explosions are going off, or people are shooting at them, and some shot hits something and shrapnel hits his eye. And he's like, keep going. He's holding his eye, So maybe that could be a thing. But I love that idea that he like, I just kind of like, I can see it in my head where like once they hit that auditorium part and Bond and Malin are like stunned, and he just kind of walks past them nonchalantly, and an assistant comes up and hands him like a handkerchief, and he just kind of wipes the stuff, and just then goes and takes his place at the like that. Just
Man,
like a little.
if they hadn't already burned that in Skyfall, I feel like you could have really played with that. Like he is like really disfigured or something. Like after that accident, like that physical trauma.
But you could do something like that to get his scar in there.
Sure.
I'm seeing it in my head, the auditorium with the lights, like just bright white. It just really what do you call it? Like clean, sort of sterile hospital aesthetic, and they're just all these people in black suits just like lining the
Here, let me add something on top of that. Okay, so in the beginning, after we get back from Mexico City, so I think we lean all the way into it, and that the 00 program is just completely shuttered. All of the agents are being retired. Like we can say like their files are being sealed. James, you're free. You can just go live your life. No one has access to this information anymore. No one knows who these 00 agents were. You're just free to go and live your life without any, consequence or whatever it might be. And we cut back to the end, and as part of this system going online, the Spectre gets access to all of the confidential or classified files on who all of 00 agents are. And Bond is watching on screen as Spectre assassins are being sent after every single one of them. It's like not just like metaphorically tearing down the system, but literally. I want you to watch like as I kill every single 00, and like, is it you should feel proud, like you're the last 00, like sort of thing. I think really making kind of a theatrical show of it.
And then that's when he could deliver, "I'm the author of all your pain."
Yeah, I think that could be interesting. Like, and then we're tying it into the more story at hand, but M and Moneypenny and Q are all of them, on this list that he's going down. Like, I'm gonna kill every single person that you've ever worked with.
So good,
and no one will ever know because their files have been sealed, sort of thing.
It's so good. Okay, so then how do we get him? How do we resolve the?
Yeah, we need something more clever than let him keep his watch. Which,
oh god, that's that whole like, doesn't time fly? Oh. And like, how does he let her get up to him and grab the without? It's just that whole sequence. I'm trying to think. Well, in light of that, then maybe we could actually leave the base and then still have like a second climax elsewhere. Because if we're setting it up as he's going after M and Moneypenny and Q, I think it could be really cool if Bond is able to escape, get to them, and then they stage sort of like the four of them in the same place, and with Madeline all team up to kind of like stop him once and for all. You kind of run the risk of repeating the sort of last stand nature of the Skyfall climax, but
sure,
I love the idea of the team working together. Because we already have precedent for Moneypenny being a field agent. That's how she was introduced to us in Skyfall, so she could be part of that thing. We let Madeline indulge a little bit more of her nature in that regard. Q is able to work some magic with the gadgets. You have this really fun frantic. So like maybe they do get out of somehow he escapes the base and they're able to get away, and then Blofeld's coming after him, and they have to kind of, I don't know. I'm trying to think how you piece this together, but there might actually be room for that to happen.
I think we just need a compelling reason for Blofeld to go to London.
Right.
And then if we're going to go to London, I think we might as well. I think it was a fun idea to have their last showdown to be in the destroyed MI5 building.
Okay. Yeah, I like that.
Right.
Does Bond steal something maybe that he needs? And that's why he has to go after him? I think does he go after him for logistical reasons, or does he go after him because Bond does something that triggers like an emotional outburst? Like, are we trying to get Blofeld to a place where he loses his cool? Because up until this point, he's been the master of cool. Do we need him to lose his cool, or do we just need to give him a logistical reason to pursue Bond?
I would feel reticent to like introduce a MacGuffin into it, where it's like, oh, the secret device is in London, sort of thing. I mean, just throwing this out, I don't know if this works yet, but if potentially, so Bond and Madeline escape find some way to escape that predicament, and they actually kind of like destroy the base, sort of thing, and like Blofeld is actually the one who's fleeing, like he's getting out of there, and they're almost like where's he gonna go? Like, he's gonna go into hiding, and Bond's like, he's been putting this together for 30 years. He's not going back into hiding. He's gonna go finish this. And Blofeld is his theory is Blofeld is personally gonna go kill M and Moneypenny and Q and
the last traces of MI6.
Yeah. He's if you ruin my plan, but it's not my motivation was not necessarily just power, right? To take the system over. My motivation to a large extent was to hurt you, and I can still accomplish that. I can still go after the people that you care about. And so they follow him to London. Like, I know where he's going. And potentially maybe even instead of Madeline being that hostage that he leaves in the MI5 building, maybe he's kidnapped, Moneypenny and Q, and they're the ones being held there. Okay, it's even more symbolic, like the last members of the MI and being held in that headquarter building.
I like that. Is that the one thing I worry about is like when I think about, I guess maybe this might just be a thing you have to get over with a movie, but just like, I just feel like you lose so much narrative tension when it's like, you're going to leave Morocco and get to London. Like, it's like, it's like you kind of skip through it in the movie, but like they got to get on a flight.
Yeah.
For like 14 hours or whatever, not 14 hours or whatever. And then just land in London. Like, but then it's like, if they stow away aboard the plane that Blofeld takes, then why wouldn't they just kill him there? Like, I'm trying to figure out how you make that leap without, because that's the part of it that was so weird to me, is I feel like you lost a lot of dramatic tension when they just kind of like cut from Morocco to London all of a sudden. You're like, well, what happened in between? Like, why?
Right. It was like a full day that something happened.
But then, the MI6 building is in London, so it's like, if you want that, you kind of have to get there.
I mean, to some extent, like, I think it makes it a little bit more plausible that Blofeld has time to set these things up. If, like, he has a day of transit sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And then, Bond and Swan are in pursuit, but we don't have to watch them on a plane for, 14 hours.
Or what if they just thought they killed him? Like, what if they blew up the base, think they killed Blofeld, and he actually is alive? Like, he survived, and so they head back to London to stop to kind of inform Moneypenny, M, and Q, and say, like, the transmitter or whatever is in the MI6 building. Like, that's where he put it or something. Like, let's go take care of that. And then when they're there, all of a sudden all the lights turn off or like over the loudspeaker or something. And he's like, do you think you get rid of me that easy? Is that too like mustache twirly? Is that too tropey?
It is Blofeld. Okay, well, let's play with that. So let's play with that direction. Let's say they think they killed Blofeld, and that's where he gets the scar. Like, at the end of that base sequence, they go back to London, and we think, we're out of the movie. They did it. M tells them, as a result of that, like, they're not moving forward with this program, and they're going to reinstate the double O's and whatever that might be, and then that's when something happens, like goes missing, gets kidnapped, something like that, and then they're like, oh shit, like, Blofeld's still alive and he's in London, and they're like, how are we going to find him? He's like, I know where to find him. Like, he wants us to find him. And it's at the ruins of the MI6 building, and he goes there to have like one kind of final climactic showdown with them.
Yeah, I like that, and I feel like that could. I love the idea of having a climax that's maybe not even an action. Like, it maybe doesn't need to be an action scene, because if we do our big action scene with the base escape, it's something I wish more movies would have the courage to do, is to have a climax between hero and villain that's more a battle of either wits or a battle of philosophies or a battle of choices, as opposed to just like a fist fight or a gun and shootout. Like I really love the Doctor Strange climax for that reason, because it feels really unique to me in the way that he's not actually fighting Dormammu. He uses his wit in a very Doctor Strangey way, solves the problem.
Right.
Like, here's a human who traps a eternal entity in an endless loop and convinces him, basically bargain. Like, I think that's interesting. So that maybe this could lend itself to Bond and Blofeld having a climactic, like a showdown of wits or a showdown of choice or consequence versus like a literal chase down a river. So we've seen that so many times. So I'm just trying to think what that could look like. But I like the idea that he gives them choice. I like the idea that he gave him a choice of trying to do things in the original film, just like you said, it just kind of like didn't seem to matter what he chose.
Right.
He was going to die anyway. But maybe something like that, where it's just like just one final twist of the knife.
I think one of the aspects that was it's kind of silly when you zoom out of it, and you stop it, considering it's a James Bond movie. But it worked for me in the moment was, when he's walking through that MI6 building and he's pasted up all the pictures of like the people that have been killed as a result of all this quantum and Spectre stuff. I think that could still be fun to play with if Blofeld is trying to prove a point or something. Like maybe instead of it being you can either escape or you can save Madeline, it's you can either kill me or you can save Q and Moneypenny or whoever is being held hostage. And I'm gonna get on this helicopter and you can reach me and you can kill me and you can get revenge for all these people that I've hurt to get back at you, or you can save these people, and like he's trying to prove a point that like Bond is bad as him, like that they're he's a sociopath, but so is Bond, and that he would have made the same decision to kill the other brother if the tables had been reserved. And James kind of like rediscovering his what that 00 means to him. He obviously makes the choice to like let him go and save his friends.
I like that, and then it leaves him out there for future, like it kind of like leaves it open. Which is what they wanted the ending to be anyway, which was not a definitive, like he's dead.
Right. He's just arrested.
Yeah. So I think that kind of leaves it open.
We could, I mean, if it feels unsatisfying for him to get away scot-free, we could still have kind of the same concept at the end where, he thinks he got away, but
and they take him down. Yeah.
Bond made, shoots harder.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that part isn't so, I think we answered a lot of the, I think what we've done already is a much more thematically tight film that I think addresses a lot of like the problems of the film as it is. I still think we haven't really talked about the Madeline. I mean, we've talked a little bit about it. I just think she in particular was such a. Is there a way that she can have some sort of agency in the ending to really like tie together the story that we're trying to tell with her? I mean, we don't have to solve this whole thing on this podcast, but. Off the top of our heads, is there something where that's just really like feels really good and satisfying with her character arc that could bring her to the point where an epilogue where she goes off into the sunset with Bond makes sense and feels earned? I'm just trying to think what the logical conclusion to her arc is. Are we trying to say that she is just like him at her core, and despite trying to be better, she just is what she is? Are we trying to say that she just can understand Bond in a way nobody else can, and therefore is kind of like the promise of a better life for him? I guess like what's her?
I guess what I'm still not sure what the ending, the ending of the movie was trying to say with him driving off. Was it trying to say he was retiring, or is it trying to say that
I think so.
He's just off to the next mission?
I think that's what, because he hasn't said. No girl since Vesper has said "I love you" to him.
Were we supposed to believe that she meant that, or that she was just trying to get the watch off of him, sort of thing, like get close to him?
I took it as a sincere thing. It could be played either way.
They've known each other for like 4 hours at that point.
I know, that's why it's such a problem. Because she plays it as sincere. Like the character doesn't seem like one who would be like an intense actor, So like the way that she's playing, the way that the actress is playing it in that scene seems like a sincere. Like I don't think Madeline is that good at espionage to fake her emotions to that degree. I think that we're meant to believe that the character means that. I'm just trying to think through like what if that's the character, what does she want? Like what's her desire? And then what's the obstacle to her desire? Like what's the obstacle that we're putting in her, like in her way? You know what I mean? Because like if we're trying to construct an arc for her, what is she seeking? I think it probably makes sense for her to be seeking distance from her legacy, or the tainted legacy of her father. Distance from that life, distance from that world. And I guess the obstacle is like her becoming intertwined with Bond and his mission, which maybe would take her to a place by the end that it's just like acceptance of, this is the life she was born into, but like she can do good, within this team. That might be a good. arc for her.
I think in this kind of iteration, to some extent, in my mind, like there's a point that Blofeld's trying to make about Bond, in that he's trying to say, like, if I hurt you enough, like the pain in your life will make you worse as a person, and it'll bring you down to my level to some extent. You know, almost kind of like, you know, Joker and Dark Knight sort of thing. Like everyone just needs a little push. You think you're a hero, but you know, I know what you are, and you're just like me when you get right down to it. I think to some extent, maybe that's sort of the same arc that I guess both Bond and Swan would be on, in some sense of like all of the baggage that they're carrying. Does it ultimately make them a worse person? You know, does it ultimately turn them into a bad person, or does it strengthen them? And I think at the end of the movie, that we want Bond to have been strengthened by the loss of M and by the loss of, you know, Valor and all these people that in his life, and to be stronger in his resolve as a 00 agent as a result of that. And maybe the same kind of arc for Swan, that, you know, she's been spending so much of her life just trying to ignore kind of where she come from and what she's seen, and the role that she plays in all this, and being thrust into it again, she kind of has to make the choice over the course of it to like let this affect her in a negative way, or to come out of it with something positive about it. You know, I think it's interesting that, like, in the movie as it is, she's a psychiatrist or psychologist of some kind, right? So like she almost wants to help broken people.
Yeah, I like that.
In some sense, maybe like figuring out by the end of it, like by leaning into where she's come from, you know, and trying to make something better out of it. That could be kind of what how she finds her own redemption. Maybe, you know, I don't know if this is too cheesy, because again, like, I don't know how far we want to push this franchise, but you know, if by the end of the movie most of the 00 agents are dead, you know, it'd be like, well, I heard there's an opening. World needs a couple more 00s, you know, like, and maybe hinting like, hey, maybe she's gonna be one of the next spies.
I actually really like that. I wouldn't have an issue with that as an audience member. I think that's really interesting. That's good. That feels good. That feels better. I just want to address a little bit of.
No, I think you're right. And if we lean that way, it has to really be earned by the end of it. Like, she has to be she can't just like shoot one guy and be like, oh wow, she knows how to use a gun. Like, I think that's how it's played right now.
Yeah,
it's like, she knew how to unload a gun. Like, we're supposed to be impressed by that. You know, she really has to be like an active participant. I think we earn that in the base sequence. Or maybe even if we do, you know, still keep the mountain sequence in that sequence. Like, she's a very active participant in that. Once that clicks, and once we have that reveal moment, like, oh crap, she knows what she's doing. From that point on, she is a very active participant in the action scene. She's not just a passenger in there.
I like that a lot, because I think it's like there were pieces there in the film, like they were hinting at this. It's just like I think it is a better film would have done something with it. You know,
I think that maybe that's how they get out of that. You know, when they finally trap Bond at the end in the base. You know. And he's like, because I think Blofeld, to some extent, like, he's so tunnel focused on Bond. Everyone else around him is a pawn, right? So to some extent, like, Swan being the daughter of Mr. White, he planned for them to meet. So it's like, it's just another piece on the chessboard. And he didn't even bother to search her. And she pulls a gun or a bomb or whatever it was, or maybe like one of Bond's gadgets, like she took his watch or something like that. He's like, you didn't even bother to search me. And like, that's how they escape, and they get the upper hand there, and you know, there's a shootout, and they get out of there.
I like that.
It's like he's just so focused on Bond, like
he just forgot
that was his mistake. Like, you know, everyone's just a pawn on the board, but
that's perfect. That's great.
Bond, right?
Because if you're playing, that makes sense. Because if you're playing at such a high level for so long, you're gonna forget to look at the pieces. You know?
Just doesn't even consider.
Yeah, like, I love that. That's good. That's really good. When you were saying that, this might be like a step. Pushing the believability a step too far, but like if she pulled a gun and then like shot Blofeld and it like skimmed his eye and that's how he got a scar, like that could happen. Maybe it's a little bit.
If we could leave the watch intact, like just have that same gag where she throws like the exploding watch.
Oh yeah.
Like what if the reveal is like, you didn't even bother to search me. I wasn't wearing a watch when I came in.
Yeah.
She's got a watch, you know.
Okay, we could play. You could play it the same, and then just have that scene play out. Yeah, I like that. So we're coming up on. Wow, we talked a lot longer than I thought we would. It was about an hour and 20.
I mean, there's a lot in that movie. Yeah. I think like the more we talked about it, the more we found things that we really liked about it and things that we kind of felt like could shift about.
Yeah, I really did think that this was gonna bring me catharsis, and it's actually just made it worse because now this movie is so great, particularly everything we did with Oberhauser, and I just can't get it out of my head, that scene where he leads him into the auditorium and the lights turn on. Like that is just such a good
audience.
Oh, and then making him watch on the screen. That makes him terrifying. It makes him a frightening villain. And I just want this to exist. So I guess that's
what this show is for, to instill some inner turmoil in the movies we'll never be able to see.
It's a double-edged sword of doing this podcast. Thanks everybody for listening. If you like this episode and you're interested in hearing more of what we have to say, we got a nice backlog of content that you can go check out. Obviously we talked about it at the beginning, but our most recent project that we're really proud of is our Firefly project. So definitely head to our website, letswritepodcast.com, and you can see kind of all of our previous episodes, and you can also check out our treatments there, as well as our full script for the pilot episode of a season 2 of Firefly. So check that out. Be sure to follow us, Let's Write Pod, on Instagram and Twitter. And stay tuned in February. As Ryan mentioned, we're going to do some cool stuff, split up episodes a little bit, and hopefully get to go a little deeper as a result of splitting it up. But yeah, thanks for joining, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.